Okay, there we are. So, as I said, welcome to the 5th of our Climate Champion series with City of Shoreline. Want to welcome everyone here tonight, and hopefully it's not too blustery windy out there. It's pretty calm here. So we're hoping to remain having power. So tonight we're excited to be learning about and discovering the benefits of energy conservation, electrification for buildings, cars and bikes and transportation solutions, and why renewable energy is key. This session is going to help us understand the connection between energy use and climate change, explore best steps that individuals in the shoreline community can take regarding energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We'll also look at how the City of Shoreline is seizing the opportunity to rapidly transform itself from an auto-oriented suburban city to a people-centered urban city. So we're going to hear how the systematic transformation of our auto-centric roads turn into a robust multimodal transportation network and how that can improve livability and help fight climate change. So before we get into that, I just going to do a few housekeeping things here. Just as a general note, we're in a webinar mode, so that means that all attendees are muted with your videos turned off. You should be able to go in your top right corner speaker view. That usually makes the slide, the large, and then the person talking a thumbnail. Also wanted to let you know we're monitoring the chat box, so if you have any questions or comments throughout, excuse me, please use the chat box to go ahead and share those. And you should find that button at the bottom of your screen in the control buttons. And those will be also recorded in the recording. And the session recording should be available tomorrow on the shorelinewa.gov/climate page, so you can look for that there. As I mentioned, we're going to learn about electrifying your life and your ride, and I'm very excited for tonight's speakers. We have Patricia Townsend from WSU Extension, Jim Jensen, who will be starting us off. Jim is with the Washington State University Energy Program, and we'll follow up with Nora Daly-Peng, who is with the City of Shoreline. So I'm very excited to introduce each of them individually when we get to their presentations. Just to let you know, presentations will run until approximately 8:15 this evening, especially since we have 3 of them, although we will be good about keeping time and make sure we don't run over. And following the presentations, we'll have time for question and answer and announcements of upcoming events. And what we're hoping for from you is that you're engaged and you ask questions, that you use the chat box to ask questions to the presenters. We will be monitoring it while the presentations are happening, just to be considerate and respectful of others. And if you need a break, go ahead and take one. And last but not least, you'll get a follow-up survey either after the webinar tonight or also a follow-up email tomorrow. If you would take the time to fill out the survey. For those of you who've been going through the series, it may get tiresome answering some of the same questions. However, it's really helpful for us to have that information so we can plan better for future events. So appreciate that very much. So speaking of that, I'm going to start with a poll and find out how many people are watching. Some people are sharing their screen and have others with you, and also what location you're viewing from. So I'm going to launch that here, and you'll see the first question. You can answer there, and then if you go to the right, you can use the scroll bar to pull it down to the second question there. So just give it about 20 more seconds here. Thanks, everybody. I'll mute my phone. Okay, let's go ahead and share the results here. All right, so about 65% of us are participating alone. Thank you for those that have someone joining you, and good to see the pets represented this week. Last week was a little shy on that. So thank you very much. And looks like majority are from Shoreline. I'm originally from Shoreline as well, so that's awesome. And neighboring neighborhoods, and welcome to those that are here from outside of the local community, but also still in King County. Great. All right, so I'm going to now introduce our first speaker. I have 2 more polls, and so I'll just double check with Jim when he would like me to share those. But I just want to get Jim introduced here. Jim grew up in the American heartland and earned his Bachelor of Arts from Grinnell College. Did I say that right, Jim?
Grinnell College, that's correct.
There we are. In Iowa, before there were cell phones. So he completed study abroad in Pune, India?
Pune.
Pune. And he completed a postgraduate study about anaerobic digestion in Europe and Asia. And throughout his career, Jim's gained a broad technical knowledge and experience about resource management, clean energy, climate change. Okay, excuse me. And also as a public sector consultant, he launched a cost-effective, climate-friendly programs for waste prevention, reuse, recycling, and composting programs. In the private sector, Jim built a successful organic soil products business, advancing innovative methods to convert waste residuals, followed by an executive role with the national company developing carbon credit markets. Now at the Washington State University Energy Program, Jim provides research, analysis, technical assistance, program development, and policy support for bioenergy and alternative fuels to state and local government agencies, tribes, and NGOs. Thank you, Jim, for being here with us.
And more important than all of that, I'm a neighbor of yours. I live just across the border in the far northwest corner of Seattle and visit Shoreline and the Central Market very often.
Awesome.
If you'd like to run those other poll questions now, that'd be great.
Let's do that. Okay. So the second poll is about, do you own or lease an electric vehicle? And have you taken action to conserve energy at home? Great job on the conserving energy at home. That's awesome. All right, terrific. Looks like we're, all right, thank you. So I'm gonna go ahead and share those results here. So some of you are lucky enough to own an electric vehicle, and wonderful results on taking action to conserve energy at home. And if you haven't yet, that's okay. We're going to learn about things you can do.
Yeah, okay. That's wonderful. Do you have those other questions too?
I sure do. I'll launch that one now. These are the home energy questions, and it is, do you rent or own your home? And do you use natural gas for cooking or heating?
It's fun to see these polls.
Yeah, it's fun. Great job. We're at like 87%. I'll just wait a few more seconds here.
I'm not voting this time.
No problem. All right. So I'll share these results here. It looks like majority of our audience is homeowners and some rental, and then natural gas for cooking or heating is about half and half.
That's about what I was expecting.
All right.
Good to know for sure.
There we are. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that and let you take it from here, Jim.
Great. Is my screen showing well?
Looks great.
Awesome. Thank you all very much. And thank you, Heather and Patricia and the City of Shoreline for inviting me to be part of your Climate Champions series. I'm showing there the title, what I'm calling my CAP, my climate action plan. The City of Shoreline has one. I have one too that I've developed over the years for low carbon living in the future. And I'd like to share a lot of the details of what I think makes a good personal climate action plan, things that you can do at home and in your transportation choices. I'm showing that particular photo there because from the 1968 Apollo 8 mission to the moon, they took that photo. It's called Moonrise. And that was the first time that any of us saw the Earth from space, where we saw that big blue marble in space. And it made a great impression on me as a youth. I was just a young kid then. And this is the Earth that I was born onto, like my parents and grandparents and all my ancestors. The Earth that I was born to had regular seasons and predictable rhythms. It had a stability that had lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, and that over the 10,000 years before that had allowed us to build civilization and for civilization to flourish. But in my lifetime, I'd like to think short lifetime, that's all changed. The Earth is not the same as what my ancestors knew, and it will never be again. The nature of the greenhouse effect has gone from deep in research labs to the halls of Congress and mass media. And the data shown here in this chart show that we've put as much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere in just the last 50 years as we did in all the 300 years before that. We're seeing and feeling the effects now, and the Earth has changed. It has changed forever. And it's what Bill McKibben described in one of his books now as Earth. That is, Earth with an extra A. It will never be the same. It helps when thinking about climate action plans, whether it's for you individually or for a city or a business, to think about carbon footprints. Our carbon footprint is made up of all the emissions impacts of all the energy and the materials and the services that you or I use. It's especially important to pay attention here in the United States. Our per capita emissions of greenhouse gases are higher than most all other countries, and it makes up for a large portion. We have 4% of the population and about 26% of all the emissions in the world. And it's especially important for us to pay attention because emissions are kind of linked with wealth, income wealth, and Americans are among the richest people in the world. I think we have a special responsibility to pay attention to carbon emissions and to do something about it. And you see how this chart looks at different materials, how it looks at materials and energy and services. Let's break that down a little more. And when you do, I believe there are three basic principles that you can apply to almost any situation when thinking about how you're going to respond to choices in life. The first one is to conserve. And then next, to be efficient. And finally, choose to renew. Conservation focuses on behavior change, rethinking basic needs versus wants. Becoming more efficient often involves adopting new equipment or technology or new ways of doing things that get more work done for the same amount of energy inputs. And when you choose to renew, that puts you squarely into the circular economy, where things are used, we avoid fossil fuels and single-use products, in favor of renewable energy and recycled products and services that renew people and communities. I've been interested to follow this series and see how you've been learning about all these different things. And whatever you're doing, I think, whatever action or purchase you might make, you can think about these three things and ask yourself questions about, does this conserve or is it more efficient? Is this something that is renewing? Let's look more closely at energy. Energy conservation means turning things off, turning off the electricity, using less of fossil fuels. It's thinking about all the behaviors you can choose that would not use electricity or fossil energy. Turn off the lights, turn down the thermostat, put on a sweater, all of those things that are behavioral changes that you can think about. Walk to the store. We're going to talk about more of those things. Use your human power on a bike or a handsaw or any of those things that you just unplug things. Use the old analog versions or mechanical versions of tools. Energy efficiency is more effective through programs like Energy Star. It's a way of looking at appliances and items. And then as customers of City Light, we're in the fortunate position of using 100% renewable electricity for all of our uses. Similar things happen when you think about materials. It's important to think about the embodied energy in materials. That's the energy that's used to make or manufacture and package and ship a product. It's a simple approach to adopt the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. I know you had a great presentation about that this past week, and it'll go a long way to thinking about a zero waste sort of approach to life. And then finally, services. Services are all those things that we use. They also use energy and materials and labor to satisfy needs and wants, and you can apply these same ideas about not using or conserving, about choosing more efficient, maybe sharing resources or services with others, and thinking about the most green or clean way of using services. Well, let's dive into the shelter. Let's talk about where we live and how we live at home. There you see a lot of different kinds of shelters, some real radical designs. Up in the upper left is called the Earth Ship. There's an example at the upper right of a passive solar home, a traditional craftsman, and a kind of an ADU in the backyard there. These sort of bring up the first idea about conservation, and that's to make sure that you've right-sized your home for yourself and your family, not go overboard. And every larger home uses more materials and energy. So think about that as you choose a place to live or make a move. This chart shows how those different design principles conserve energy, natural light and airflow, using the natural sun radiation for warming the home. Those are things that can be adopted and part of a home design. This chart shows the typical distribution of energy use in American homes. Heating and cooling are very significant costs, shifting at times depending on geography. This is followed by water heating and all the different appliances used at home. And then we look at some of the areas that are focused on for action that will support greater efficiency. LED lighting is one. Efficient shower heads, appliances, especially laundry appliances. Shower heads and laundry, that's important because they often use hot water, and hot water takes energy to make. It also, depending on the appliance, can use more water, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. Heating and cooling systems, windows and insulation. I show all these examples too because these are ones that City Light is eager to help you look at your home. And some of these make more sense if you're a homeowner or a renter. But these are all things that City Light would like to help you with. And in the world at large and in this area, there's a trend toward electrifying all of these different choices. And the reason for that goes back to City Light, and they're having 100% renewable electricity that they offer to all of us in their service territory. So switching to electric appliances, electric heaters, electric heating and cooling can go a long way toward reducing your personal carbon footprint. And in terms of heating itself, you know, I know many of you are using natural gas, and this isn't to say that you should run out right away tomorrow to change it out. But if you're in the market, or if you are thinking about changing, me personally, I changed from oil heat recently and got one of these ductless heating systems. They're sometimes called mini splits as well. And what it does is, rather than move hot air, it transfers heat from outside in the heat pump on the left to a device up on the wall inside a room that uses that transfer liquid to create hot air right at the source of that device and push it into the room. And they're really nice because in this case, that heat transfer can work in both directions. So it can be heating and cooling. It can also lower heating costs by 25 to 50% compared to other kinds of electric heating systems. It's much lower cost than oil, and it's pretty competitive with natural gas, especially over the lifetime of the system. It allows you to create zones for heating and cooling in your house. If you like one area warmer or cooler, it can do that. And I think it improves indoor air quality a lot versus the kind of typical ducted heating systems. And they're really easy to use with wireless control devices, thermostats. It can offer all the same kind of time of day heating or cooling. So I like these systems, and if you are looking in the future, I think that's one certainly worth considering. This chart's, this pyramid is real helpful to think about. It starts at the bottom with sort of low-cost conservation methods, and then works up through energy efficiency and finally ends up at your renewable options. And it charts the complexity and cost of these over their lifetime. So right at the bottom, it starts with just a basic understanding and doing things to learn about your home, or maybe having a professional home energy audit is a great way of getting a better understanding of where you could make investments that would be very cost effective. The next level up is, you know, the temperature settings. It's all those conservation behaviors that you can choose, turning things off, having fewer appliances, making sure that if you have appliances plugged in, that they get turned off at night and aren't sort of, there's a term of vampire use, of where they're constantly taking little bits of power out of your outlets. Make sure that they can get turned off. And sometimes that helps with a single power strip that you can just flip the switch and turn off. And they have some really cool devices now that you can operate with a phone or an app and turn an outlet on or off that's providing power somewhere in the house. Look up at air sealing, making sure that you've sealed all the cracks in the foundation, around the doors, around windows. Use weather stripping, use storm windows in the wintertime to keep air from coming in. Think about appliances. And then for your money and for the complexity of the job, insulation and better ventilation systems, like installing little fans in the roof so that you keep the attic cool in the summertime. Those kinds of choices, or those kinds of actions, tend to be really cost effective. And a good home energy auditor will tell you to look at those things first before you do things like new windows. Everybody gets excited about windows, but they're rather costly. and you can get a big bang for your buck looking at insulation and ventilation first. Water heating, you saw that that was a pretty big piece of the puzzle, so worth looking at that. And then we talked a little bit about heating and cooling systems and the value you can get there, and not just economic value or emissions reductions, but really home air quality and livability can be impacted by that as well. I mentioned water. I think it's important to, if you're thinking about your home and your garden, to think about being water wise. We use a lot of water in the United States, maybe 2 or 3 times what many other countries use on a per capita basis. And you need to think every drop of that potable water that we use, it takes energy and services to produce that. And so thinking about ways that you can save water. This chart's really nice because it has all the different things like using plants that need less water, all the different kind of conservation measures, as well as the efficiency measures that you would use. Installing new toilets, putting in aerators, using a broom instead of water to clean a driveway or walkway. Those are all things that in the end conserve and save water and use it more efficiently. I'd like to just mention solar a little bit here, because even though city light is 100% clean and carbon free, going solar is satisfying to many people. You can reduce your federal income taxes through a 26% credit on the cost of your solar system. And through net metering, you get a direct credit against your electricity bill for every kilowatt hour of solar energy that you produce. It can be satisfying. We've done it at our house, and it just adds to the kind of clean energy that's on the grid there. Even home sales. I've seen a lot of statistics about home sales have been improved by an average of $15,000 when solar systems are installed, and they work for 25, 30 years. They're actually guaranteed by manufacturers for that length of time. And if your home is not perfectly suited for solar or you're renting, there are opportunities around the state to invest in community solar projects where, like other investments, you get a piece of the ownership and you get to create a community or utility scale solar project and have a piece of that and enjoy some of the benefits of that as well. The cost of solar is dropping fast, and it's not just for us with home systems, but especially on the utility scale. The cost of solar since the Obama years and all the investments they made in solar technology, as well as the use of solar around the world, has driven the price down. And as you can see, it's driven the amount of installations higher and higher each year. Similar things are happening with wind energy. These are becoming already lower than existing coal electricity and very competitive with natural gas. I think you'll see a lot more of this use in all kinds of applications, commercial, residential, as well as utility scale in the future. Let's shift now to transportation. This chart inverts from the other pyramid that we looked at, and it has all the conservation measures up here at the top. So walking, running, using your human power to get around. It can be very effective for short and sometimes long distances, depending on your abilities. Those are conservation measures. We don't use energy for that necessarily in terms of fossil fuel or electricity. Public transportation is another way of being efficient with transportation, of sharing a ride with more people, using taxis and Ubers and other connected transportation systems is a way of doing that. Car sharing and carpooling is another way of sharing that service and being more efficient with the service itself. And then at the very bottom, it's, having your own car and flying places instead of using other methods of getting longer distances. And so that kind of sets up that whole same conservation, efficiency, and renewable opportunity in transportation. And it's not just energy, but by bicycling and taking transit and using the bus, we save a whole lot of energy, and we save a whole lot of space as well in our urban environment. And that becomes more and more critical as we become more dense in the future. As you're thinking about your own personal transportation, I encourage you to think of two wheels first. And then maybe, these are, kind of conventional bikes up here. This one's a little more interesting, the recumbent style. If biking, and the hills get to you, I'm an older guy. I've invested in an electric bike. Getting a little bit of an electric motor assist while pedaling helps to flatten the hills and make biking, to the Central Market or to the theater up on Fifth or somewhere else. It just makes it a little more easy. And I find that I ride more, use the bike more with that pedal assist. And if you're one that likes motorcycles, there's some really great electric options coming out for motorcycles as well. So as we go, it's important, you're going to need to learn about new fuel and drive systems in cars. So on the left here, you have the kind of conventional gasoline or diesel car with a fuel tank. Many of you know about hybrid cars. You may have a hybrid car. It has a little battery inside that is juiced up by the braking, regenerative braking. And then it has a small electric motor that helps to assist. You might think of it the way an electric motor helps on the bike also. And then the newer vehicles are the all battery electric, where you're taking electricity from the grid or from your own solar array and filling up batteries and using the whole ride with an electric motor. And then in between these two, the hybrid and the battery electric car, is the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So it has a fuel tank and an engine like a conventional car, but it also has a somewhat larger battery and an electric motor that you can plug in and add more juice that way. So these are typically getting anywhere from 20 to maybe 50 or 60 miles of range, all electric, before it switches over to the engine and fuel tank. Sometimes it's the fuel tank runs the engine that puts more juice in the battery. So it kind of uses the electric motor more. And that's a nice way of extending your range. Or if you only have one vehicle and you don't want to, go all electric, you might feel better about trying the plug-in version here to get you more experience with plugging in. It can do most of your urban driving, get you around town, get you to work downtown and back, plug it in at night, just use a regular standard outlet to plug it in, and you're ready to go the next morning. So a lot of people with these plug-in hybrids are doing 70, 80, even 90% of all their driving on electricity, but it gives them that option of going further when they want to. Now, I have gone out and I got one of these Kia Soul electrics, very nice car, gets about 100 miles of range, but you have all these other options too now, a lot of different passenger sedans. If you're thinking about plugging in, I encourage you, if you're shopping for a new vehicle, I'm not telling you to go do it, but if it's something you're shopping for, look for a vehicle with a plug. And this website down here, PlugStar, is part of the nonprofit Plug-in America, and they'll help you find the right kind of car for you. These two are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. These cars, the Niro and the Kona, are kind of out there. Washington became a ZEV state recently, zero emission vehicle state. So we're following rules from California. And that means more of the car manufacturers are going to be bringing their plug-in options to Washington state. You're going to start seeing the Mach-E, and you're going to start seeing electric pickup trucks and plug-in hybrid electric trucks. The range is increasing too. You know, I mentioned the my Soul is getting somewhere down here in this 100-mile of range. All these other vehicles are starting to get into the 200. It's not uncommon to find an electric passenger sedan with more than 200 miles of range, even getting up now to this luxury car that's got a 500-mile range battery system. And while most people charge at home, either with a standard plug or with a little bit beefier charging system, you can leave the house every day with a full tank. But in addition, there are all these public charging stations that are coming along. The whole country is being littered now with public charging options. And it just gives you a greater range when you have the ability to charge up. Some are faster than others. These are the kinds of, you know, level 1 is just your standard electric outlet. And I do most of my charging that way just to get around the city. But then you have the level 2, a little bit faster, gets you a few more miles every hour as you charge, up to the DC fast charging and the ultra fast charging, which are coming along and which are going to be really important for the medium and heavy duty applications. And medium and heavy duty is coming along, both in the public sector. King County has made a commitment to fully electrify their fleet, probably through the next 10 or 15 years. And then a lot of private sector companies are moving toward electric vehicles for their delivery vans, especially when they go and come back to the same place every day. Works really nicely. And the reason why electrification is becoming so popular is because of the cost benefits. The annual fuel costs, I mean, the vehicles cost a little more up front, sometimes substantially more, but the benefits of reducing the cost per mile for fuel and maintenance costs are cut in half. It makes the total cost of owning these vehicles over the lifetime really beneficial. And that upfront cost is going to come down. Batteries make up a big part of that upfront cost, and those battery prices are coming down really quickly. And that's going to help put these vehicles right in the same range as a conventional gas vehicle. But when it comes to emissions, there's really no comparison versus gasoline and the average vehicle using an all-electric vehicle. And this is the average Northwest power. When you factor in the city light is 100% clean, you have no emissions out the tailpipe of using this vehicle. But looking even at lifetime CO2 emissions, the battery manufacturer is a significant part of an electric vehicle. The manufacture and recycling, the end-of-life recovery, maintenance of that battery, these are significant emission issues when it comes to battery cars. But look at the difference in fuel. And when you factor in 100% renewable electricity, you're seeing substantial lifetime emissions reductions. I'd like to finish off this last section with just a few other things that interest me when it comes to personally reducing carbon emissions. Food is the next one, and I understand you're going to hear a lot about food and carbon emissions next week. But in my case, I like to think about eating low on the food chain and eating closer to home. So we garden a lot, we grow some of our own food, we like to buy from local farmers. And I especially like this kind of mantra from Michael Pollan, who's thought a lot about food. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And I try to use that as a thought choice determinant as I go about my day. Another thing you can think about, I practice, is sequestering carbon. So you can put a lot of carbon into the soil and into plant biomass, into trees in particular. And that carbon can be stored for a long time. So that's why there's a lot of attention being paid to soil sequestration and protecting and enlarging forest lands in North America and around the world. You personally can compost at home and plant trees every once in a while. And though most of these other kinds of greenhouse gases come from industrial processes, you can personally impact the amounts of methane or natural gas, the organics that you put into landfills. If you waste food, it goes to a landfill, it produces methane gas. And nitrous oxide, choosing organic foods is a way of supporting organic agriculture, and that can reduce nitrous oxides. And then I like to say, put your money where it matters most. If you have investments, retirement funds, for example, have a look at the choices for ones that don't invest in fossil fuels, and have more money going into clean energy companies. And then I like to mention, as someone who's done some work in the carbon credit markets, that these offsets are a form of a climate-friendly investment where you put an investment, sometimes a very small investment for a ton or two of carbon reduction, in a project that's verified by a third-party system. And that helps you to maybe reduce the emissions that are really difficult to avoid right now, like flying to go visit family in a far-off city or to travel. That's the way I could think about carbon credit offsets. And then finally, I'd just like to say that I think it's really important that we be active witnesses. Talk with your friends and neighbors. Share what you learn and how you're changing your choices. Get involved to change the big picture also. Our personal carbon emissions are not the biggest part of all carbon emissions. It really is about companies, the public sector, private entities. It's been said that 100 corporations are responsible for 71% of all carbon emissions. So let's think about being part of that big picture, and one of the most important things that climate hawks can do is to vote. So thank you again for the opportunity to visit with you today. If you have questions, I invite you to reach out by email, and I look forward to being part of the future of climate reduction and climate action. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jim. We had one question here. How does composting sequester carbon?
So it's important to think about, so plants take up sunlight and plants take up carbon dioxide and release oxygen. All that carbon dioxide that's stored in a plant biomass, if it's in a tree, it's kept for a long time. But if you're just growing annuals and tomatoes or green grass, that carbon is picked up when you take it up, or when you clean up the garden. You have all this carbon in that plant biomass. When you compost, some of that carbon dioxide is lost back to the atmosphere through decomposition. It's part of the carbon cycle. But some of that carbon, the organic matter in compost, is carbon. And when you put that back into the soil, again, some of it will slowly decompose, but over time, you can improve or increase the amount of carbon in your garden soil, or on a big scale in agriculture. They can increase the organic matter and the carbon concentration in soil organic matter. And it's that buildup of carbon. The prairie soils had tons of carbon that's been lost over time through tillage and other practices. We can build that back up at home a little bit, but bigger picture in agriculture.
Great. Thank you, Jim, so much. We had a couple of other questions, and I'm just going to hold on them until We have two other speakers. I want to stay on time,
Great.
and also
Thank you.
thank you so much. This was great, and thank you for the promotion of next week's session, which is food and climate, a recipe for success. It's going to be another good one. So in addition to Jim, we have Dr. Patricia Townsend from Washington State University. And she's a regional extension specialist at WSU Extension. And in this position, Patricia works with stakeholders throughout the Pacific Northwest on issues related to renewable energy, ecosystem services, and green infrastructure. She recently joined WSU's Metropolitan Center for Applied Research and Extension. And her dissertation research, she worked closely with landowners and local conservation practitioners to find realistic solutions to land degradation and planning for climate change in Costa Rica. Patricia received a PhD from the University of Washington. I won't hold that against her. No, I'm just kidding. And a master's from the University of Florida. Thank you, Patricia, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Heather, for that nice introduction. Can you hear me okay?
As long as you speak out nice and loud like that.
Okay, I'll stay nice and loud. Okay, thank you for that lovely introduction. So I'm going to talk mainly about transportation and electricity tonight. I'm going to touch on a lot of the things that Jim mentioned and brought up. So I'm hoping that this is going to not be redundant, but just a greater detail and a little bit more depth to what we've already heard this evening. And Heather, I don't know if my presentation is doing the same thing that it did last week, where it's not advancing. Oh boy. So what I did last week, for those of you that joined me last week, was that I had to stop sharing, and then I had to share again because my screen would not advance initially. So just have patience, bear with us as we go through this technical difficulty here. Okay, there we are. There's the second slide.
Good. All right.
Okay, so I wanted to tell you about a project called Drawdown. You can go to their website. They also have a book, and it's all about solutions. When you think about climate change and you hear talk after talk or presentation after presentation, as I frequently do, about kind of the hard things that are happening and the uncertain future, it's good to have solutions. So Drawdown is all about solutions. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about electricity in terms of Drawdown, and then more in depth about transportation. But I would encourage you to look it up. The book is an easy read. I think it's available in local libraries now, and then they have a new publication out as well. So when we think about Seattle City Light, those of us that live in Shoreline or nearby communities as I do, you get that 100% clean energy. So we know that we are not generating carbon emissions from the energy that we're getting because we have Seattle City Light. I know I looked at the poll this evening, and we did have some, our participants this evening are coming from nearby communities. We even had one from a state other than Washington. I'm not sure where that is, but your power supply for your electricity is not necessarily 100% clean energy. Puget Sound Energy is a local electric company. They also supply natural gas to their customers. And over 50% of their electricity generation currently is coming from fossil fuels. That is something they're working to change, but as of 2018, pretty recently, you know, they were using a lot of fossil fuels. So if you have an electric car and you're a Puget Sound Energy customer, you're going to be better off charging your car at another station if you have one where you work or someplace where you shop that has Seattle City Light energy in terms of the emissions, because coal is much, much worse than any of our, you know, 100% clean emissions. And natural gas is not as bad as coal, but still not ideal either. When you look at statewide, you see that it's a better picture. We do have some coal, depending on where you live in Washington, and also some natural gas. There was legislation that came in 2019, if I remember correctly, that we would be carbon neutral by 2030 and then 100%, clean energy by 2045. So 2030 is not that far away. Some utilities can do carbon credits to help them get there, but we've got 10 years before we really are getting to carbon neutral throughout the state. The coal, as I mentioned, that's harder to deal with. The natural gas, there are other solutions. Some of you may know about anaerobic digestion, and that's where you basically take a waste and capture the methane that is produced from the decomposition. So very near us at Monroe, Washington, there is a facility called Qualco Energy. It's at it's co-located with a dairy, and they're harvesting not only the manure from the dairy, but a lot of food waste is in there. And then through the anaerobic digester they have there, they make electricity. So you can take that same waste and you can also make, gas for heating, for cooking, for transportation. So you can basically use that gas to replace natural gas. So this is a map throughout Washington State that shows that the pink lines are natural gas lines, and you could pipe in the biogas, and all the green dots, those are different dairies within Washington State. And I know it's a bit hard to see, but there are pink triangles, and these are existing anaerobic digesters that make biogas. So the biogas can also come from landfills, wastewater treatment plants. You can get biogas. So there's another source that can help us replace the natural gas that we use in Washington State for electricity generation, for our cooking, for different things like that. So if we drill down to Shoreline and think about this chart on the right, which Autumn showed us during the first session, if you attended that, about where the greenhouse gases come from in Shoreline. And in the city of Shoreline, transportation is the big problem. And looking at transportation from gasoline, transportation from diesel vehicles, that makes up, over 60% of the emissions that we have. If you look at nationwide, it's much less from transportation. But part of that is because we have so much clean energy in Washington State. So the challenge for us is really our transportation mix and how to improve that in Washington State. So Washington, like much of the United States, we're very much a car culture. This is a view looking down towards downtown Seattle in an evening, fraught with traffic. You're bumper to bumper on your way into Seattle or on your way out of Seattle. If you look at gasoline consumption from the early 60s till today, it's doubled. So it has really increased during that time period. We have been in love with cars for a long time. The early cars, they ran on gasoline. They also ran on ethanol. And just as an FYI, if you go buy gasoline today, most likely you're going to see this little green circle, which is the amount of fuel, ethanol, that is in your gasoline. That ethanol is a renewable fuel, but it has its own environmental impacts because it is primarily made from corn that is grown in the Midwest. And corn ethanol, in terms of the improvements in greenhouse gas emissions compared to gasoline, is about the same, maybe a little better. There's a lot of debate about that. So this is a picture from the Drawdown Project that I talked about. This is from a new publication they have out called the Drawdown Review. So these darker kind of tan circles in here, this is more or less kind of easy ways that we can reduce our greenhouse gases. So public transit, carpooling, making our cities more walkable, bicycle infrastructure, which Nora's going to talk about some at the end. These lighter circles, this is the more challenging area. This is kind of the maximum amount of emissions that we can reduce if we try really hard to do that. And so this is kind of how they envision that we are going to transition throughout the world, not just the United States, to really tamp down those emissions that we have associated with transportation. The other two areas that they look at in transportation is enhancing efficiency, and they talk about hybrid cars, and then they also talk about our different shipping methods when it comes to trucking, ocean shipping, those type of things. The one thing where I think it's relevant as a consumer is efficient aviation. One thing that we can do is that if we do fly, try and be efficient about your flying. And what I mean by that is take with you as little as possible, because if all of us take 2 large suitcases, that adds up to the weight of the airplane. That makes the airplane use more fuel, which means more carbon emissions. And then the third area they talk about mobility in terms of reducing emissions is electric cars. And so those can have a big impact as well. But when you look at these 3 and compare them in this drawdown review, you have shift to alternatives, that's number 1. Increasing efficiency is number 2, and then electric vehicles is number 3. So it is an important piece of the puzzle, but we're going to get much better, much faster, and it's easier to really think about shifting to alternative modes of transportation. So within Shoreline, there's a lot of information about electric vehicles on their website. I encourage you to look there. They have 19 EV charging stations in the city right now, and they hope to have 30 by 2030. And so they're going forward with that. If you think about King County, as Jim mentioned, they're planning to really increase their fleet to have more electric vehicles, and starting in 2025 all the way through 2043, and having more electric vehicles, more charging stations at the park and rides, really to help us electrify our transportation system here in the Puget Sound region. However, I do want to mention a little bit that having lots and lots of electric cars, especially as the Puget Sound region grows, isn't going to ameliorate the traffic on I-5. If we're all in electric vehicles, we're not going to get there faster. You also have to think about the infrastructure. It's going to take time for us to get there, for us to have charging stations, you know, everywhere. You know, people that own homes, it's easy for them to charge at their home, in their garage if they have one. If you don't own a home, you know, where are you going to charge your vehicle? And then the one project that I know about that is a WSU center looks at the materials that you need to make the batteries for these electric vehicles. And those are in somewhat short supply. They are critical materials. They are rare earth elements, if that means anything to anyone, but they are limited, and China really has a stronghold on the market for that. And so there's research to try and make those batteries out of different materials that are more abundant, and also to do more battery recycling. So the future, I don't think it's for all of us to switch to electric cars. I think it's that we do have electric cars, but we have fewer personally owned cars. So we're still going to need to carpool. When Heather and I worked in our office, which we don't do now, we would carpool 1 day a week. But carpooling right now is probably not a smart thing for us to be doing unless we're doing something I've invented called pod pooling, which is you're carpooling with people that you associate with on a regular basis. I don't know if you've noticed, I put a mask here on Hitler. I think he looks quite handsome with his mask. But we have to remember that there will be a day past COVID-19. And when we're past COVID-19, we can get back to looking at apps that help us to carpool and ride share, so that we can be social and use our vehicles more efficiently. So when you are driving, I noticed that, whoops, that about half of us did have electric vehicles, and the other half, we should have asked the question if you currently have a gasoline powered engine, which I currently still do. When you do drive, if you do drive, make some thought into it. You know, if you're going out to run errands, it's more efficient to do a lot of things at once as opposed to make 3 or 4 trips throughout the week. More efficient to stop on your way home from work and get groceries as opposed to going out separately to get groceries. I did a little research on idling today, and I was actually surprised that 10 seconds or more, you should actually turn off your car. It just cuts down on the emissions. It's going to save you money. It's going to save on air pollution. There are campaigns in schools to help keep the idling low because you don't want air pollution around schools. When you drive, don't drive like a race car driver, you know, drive slow, don't, you know, be slamming on the brakes, reduce the weight in your car. When I was working on this presentation last night, I went out and got the 50 pounds of dog food out of my car because there's no reason for it to be in there. You know, there's lots of things you can do if you have a gasoline vehicle to make it more efficient. You know, until there's a time in your life where you don't have a car or you switch to electric vehicle, it's start today. Let's not wait until we all have electric cars. So lots of resources, and I know Heather's going to include some of these in the follow-up email that she sends out. So in terms of working, a lot of us are working at home. I'm one of those that's working at home. I know Jim and Heather are both working at home. Autumn's working at home. You know, telework has become part of our lives. It wasn't a plan for that we would get there, but that's what we're doing now. And it could be that we shift as a society to more of us doing telework, which is going to be a benefit in terms of the transportation of us not going to work. You know, when there is a time that more of us are having to go back to work, you know, look into these options of ride sharing and van pools and taking alternative transportation in terms of are there other ways for you to get to work? Even if you do it one day a week, you know, make Fridays your commute adventure day or something like that. One day a month. I mean, a little bit puts us in the right direction. So one thing I want to alert people to is there's several apps out there that you can use for trip planning. King County has a Metro trip planner, and then Google Maps is really good for trip planning because you can, the one reason I like Google Maps is that you can say, you know, how do I want to get there? Do I want to walk? Do I want to drive? Do I want to take public transit? Do I want to bike? And I've used it quite a bit for biking, and it's really good for predicting about, you know, a good route for me to get to a place, about how long it will take me to get there. So I like that. Jim and I were talking about this, and he said that he used it in, I think it was San Diego. I know it was somewhere in California recently, and it helped him plan his trip without having to rent a car. So there are tools out there for helping us move ourselves around in a more sustainable way. I encourage you all to use them, learn more about them. I think this is my last slide here. Here's an email address where you can contact me. I got through that pretty quickly, so if you have any questions, maybe we can pause here for a couple of minutes for questions before we switch over to Nora.
Yes, please. Okay, first question is, please explain the difference between net zero carbon versus 100% carbon free, for either you or Jim.
Is that in terms of the electricity generation, I think? And I think that has to do with whether the electricity itself is not emitting electricity, emitting carbon. And when you think about Puget Sound Energy, which currently has a mix of some coal and some natural gas, is that they're doing some carbon offsets. So that's a distinction, and hopefully getting to a place where a electricity provider, energy provider is producing that energy without any carbon emissions, that they don't have to buy the carbon offsets. Does that answer that? I think that's what the question was.
Yeah, I would just add, I think that's exactly right. It's about that legislation that was passed, the Clean Energy Transformation Act, and it requires utilities to be carbon neutral. And as you said, by 2030, they can use offsets to get there.
Mm.
But by 2045, they have to be generating and providing 100% clean electricity. So
Got it.
no more fossil electricity at all.
Mm-hmm. So the net zero carbon, they're using carbon offsets possibly to get there.
Yeah, they're using different kinds of offsets in the legislation, and Department of Commerce is actually making rules about what all that means and how that'll work, but different ways of generating offsets to get there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. And Lee said thank you also. So another question we had, is it better to keep your gas car until it dies, or buy, or get rid of that and buy an electric vehicle?
I think Jim should weigh in on this as well. I think it depends on your driving habits. If you're driving a lot, you're probably going to be better off to switch to an electric car. I have an older, gasoline powered car that my parents gave me that I'm rather fond of. I try and drive it as little as possible. So, I don't know the answer, and I don't know if Jim has seen any research out there that helps you as like a decision tool of like when it makes the most sense to switch.
I've not seen a tool like that. It's an interesting idea. I have no complaints. I wholeheartedly agree with your answer. I think it just depends. But if you're driving a lot of miles on it and you really want to get to be more, low carbon in your living, then making that transition sooner makes a lot of sense. But there are emissions involved in battery manufacture, and it's if you look at it, it's kind of an emission hole early on in the life of that vehicle, but it's totally made up for after several years of driving.
Yeah, and kind of along that train of thought, when you compare the fossil fuels obtained from oil rigs for gas and lithium mined for car batteries, we're assuming that the electric vehicle batteries is the lesser of the two evils due to emissions, but just wondering if you have thoughts on that.
Yes, as I mentioned, the research is trying to get away from some of those rare earth elements that are mined in practices that we would frown upon if we knew the details about them. So we're trying to get away with that, realizing that electric vehicles are going to be ramped up, that there's going to be a lot more demand for them. So that is an area of research at WSU, University of Washington. That's a whole nother project, of trying to not switch one evil for another evil.
Yeah, and same point. There's a lot of research going on all around the world because this is a demand that people have for battery storage. And it's not just in vehicles, it's battery storage for solar and wind energy. It's all kinds of storage, and there are going to be whole new forms of battery technology coming, and it shouldn't come it'll be in the near future.
Okay, great. And let's see, any thoughts about getting gas guzzlers off the road? That would have a bigger carbon impact than a whole bunch of electric vehicles. Economic equity issue.
Yeah, I know it was during the Obama administration, they had the Cash for Clunkers program. I mean, I think they should bring that back, to help people that, have a gas guzzler transition to something else.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that equity question, and like cash for clunkers, but it kind of goes beyond that. And one thing the legislature did in this recent session, when they reinstituted the sales tax exemption for electric vehicles, they applied it also to used electric vehicles as well as the newer ones. So that Diane made the point about getting a used EV, a lot of them coming off of leases, short-term leases, and they're in great condition. Many of them are low miles, and they still have a lot of their battery range, and they're out there for $10,000 and $12,000, which is, you know, it's maybe still more for a lot of folks, but it also is a little more affordable. And without that sales tax exemption, that helps. And then I'm also a big believer, and it goes back to the point that Patricia made about, you know, cars are not going to save us. We need to think long-term about much more sharing of transportation and of what I like to talk about. We densify our housing. We need to densify our transportation system too. And that means shared rides, it means carpooling, it means transit. And the fact that King County and 10 other transit agencies around the state are trying out electric vehicles, as well as fuel cell electric vehicles that use hydrogen for, you know, big heavy duty vehicles like that. That I think too is an equity issue in terms of cleaning up the air, because those bigger vehicles are spewing diesel pollution, and getting them off the road is just as important.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Our housemate, who's a renter with us, swapped his big SUV to a more efficient, very lean motorcycle. And now the SUV is just like, it's got spider webs growing under it because it's been parked so long. Anyway, Metro keeps cheering for its new, oops, it moved up on me, hold on. Metro keeps cheering for its new electric buses on the east side. Why is there no outrage that they will be using Puget Sound Energy's coal plants to charge these buses?
I'm not certain where all the buses are charged. If I know they do a lot of that at their main base down in South Seattle. That's a good question, though. I might look into it.
And kind of a follow-up, Metro has transit bases in both Seattle City Light and Puget Sound Energy territories. And as Patricia mentioned, the Clean Energy Transformation Act commits Washington to an electricity supply free of greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. There's also, oh, this is from Autumn. There's also an added benefit of reduced emissions for people riding located near those buses as they transition to electric. And I just want to do a plug for carpooling. I mean, I'm speaking for Patricia here, but every job I've had, if I have not taken the bus, I've tried to find a carpool partner, usually successful, and it's a lot of fun. And may not be like carpool karaoke every time, but it makes the drive go faster also, not just because of the carpool lane, but just the company. Last question I have, Patricia, biomethane, isn't it just as damaging as regular methane gas? What makes it better?
It's better because it's being released anyway as the manure decomposes. It's going to release methane. And if there is a way that we can capture that energy and that gas that is being released and then use it for energy, it is better than, you know, digging in the earth and digging up fossil fuels.
Great, thank you. And if I missed any questions, I apologize. You can ping me again on chat and we'll get to them after we hear from Nora. So now I am thrilled to introduce our final speaker for the night, Nora Daly Peng. She is an American Institute certified planner, professional landscape architect, lead accredited professional, and is a senior transportation planner and landscape architect for the City of Shoreline, Washington, USA. She champions keeping cities not just livable, but lovable through smart mobility planning. And she happens to be a fellow Shoreline resident. So looking forward to hearing from you, Nora.
Good evening. Thanks everyone for having me part of this presentation. And I just want to check, how's my sound?
It's good.
Good. Okay, so with the title of this presentation, I'm kind of doing the transportation piece and electrify your ride. I was thinking some of you may be wondering if and when e-bikes and e-scooters are going to hit the streets in Shoreline. And the truth is, I don't know, but we as a city are transforming from an auto-oriented suburb to a people-centered community with multimodal options. And I'm going to walk through some of those and be really happy to hear the dialogue that follows. So first, let's just take a look at where we are, our place in the world. So Shoreline, as you know, is part of the Puget Sound region. And we have a population of about 55,000, and we're growing. Puget Sound is one of the fastest growing regions in the United States. And over the next 30 years, it's expected that our Puget Sound population will grow by 40%. So that begs the question, how can we grow and at the same time keep our cities not just likable, but lovable? And the answer lies in how we synergize growth around transportation choices. So with 2 light rail stations opening in 2024, and the anticipated growth and density around those stations, Shoreline has an opportunity and a responsibility to shape the future of our city as well as our region. As you know, right now Shoreline is predominantly single-family homes, but that's changing. Zoning around the light rail stations is meant to provide a variety, density, and a variety of housing choices, and also ground floor retail. And then when we look at our 2 new hubs, light rail hubs, that will be coming, the 145th Street station and the 185th Street station, the projections are that more than a third of our city's residents will live within a 10-minute walk to one of those light rail stations. And everyone, virtually everyone in the city would be within about a 10-minute bike ride of a light rail station. So how can we get those people to the light rail station on many modes, not just driving, but walking, biking, taking bus transfers? Well, there's a policy for that. In 2016, Shoreline City Council adopted a complete streets ordinance that requires the accommodation of all modes for all roads. That basically means we need to outfit our streets to accommodate walking, biking, driving, and taking transit. And so this policy is really the legal teeth that helps us fit out our streets for multi-modes, one project at a time. But let's take a look at how that plays out on the ground. So our city is relatively small. Shoreline is a little less than 12 square miles. But when you look at the national average for trips, well, this is a good thing. This is a good metric that about half of our trips are within 3 miles, but only 2% of those trips are by bike. And so as a transportation planner, that makes me want to look at, well, what are those barriers to biking? Do we have hills? Yes, we can thank the ice age glaciers for that. And as Jim was mentioning earlier tonight, perhaps electric scooters or bikes could flatten those hills. So this leads us to a poll. I think Heather's going to assist me.
Yeah, let me get that pulled up here. Okay. Transportation questions. Do you own a bicycle? Do you own an e-bike or an e-scooter? Have you ever tried an e-bike or e-scooter share? Fair amount of bike owners, that's great. Okay. Looks like
Excellent.
most people
Okay.
most people have voted, so I'll go ahead and share that now.
All right. Well, it looks like most of you tonight own a bike and a regular manual bike. A few of you, 2% of you, have an e-bike or an e-scooter, and I'm jealous. I would like one. And about 20% of you have tried an e-bike or scooter. Thanks for doing that poll.
Okay.
Okay, well, back to removing obstacles. So another way we can take more biking and walking trips is by having an interconnected trail system. And the good thing is that we already have 2 regional trails that I'm sure you know and love. The Interurban Trail that really moves through the heart of our city. And then the nearby Burke-Gilman Trail that wraps around Lake Washington. And with the opportunity of the light rail construction through Shoreline, it provided an opportunity to build a trail, a shared use path that parallels that. And it would be 2.5 miles that would stretch basically from our southern border at 145th and all the way up to the 195th pedestrian bike overcrossing. This vision is to connect pedestrians and cyclists directly to light rail stations, to parks, to business districts, to the library. And it is meant for recreation and for commuting. So I just wanted to point out 2 really important east-west belts that tie into this regional system. And that is 195th corridor, the north, and 155th, excuse me. A couple of years back, our city worked with Lake Forest Park to create bike routes for these commutes. So these commutes are signed, and there's still improvements that are needed. There's still the hills. There's, in a lot of cases, it's just a sign helping with wayfinding to connect these trails. So I wanted to show you what we've been working on over the last 10 years for the 195th corridor to make that more conducive for walking and biking. And so incrementally, we have been building out this street to, it's to my left. You see in orange the interurban trail, and then there's I-5, and there's that bridge crossing. And so two springs ago, we had a ribbon cutting with the mayor and the elementary, Echo Lake Elementary School Patrol, for a 3-block section of shared use path that connects the school with the interurban trail. Some of you may have walked or taken a bike ride on the shared use path on 195th between Meridian all the way to 5th. And then I'm really happy to share that through a TIB grant, we are going to be we're going to be extending that shared use path from 5th all the way to that 195th overcrossing of I-5. So another piece that's is the street network, to take a look at removing barriers to what we call the first last mile trips. So if you were going to be taking light rail, how do you get from your home to it, and making those choices, or choices beyond just driving, enticing, affordable, and fun. And so here's 185th presently, and it's really outfitted like a typical arterial in our city. Car lanes, bike lanes with just paint, and probably about 5-foot sidewalks. And over the last couple of years, our city has led this new vision for the 185th corridor. It's a really important east-west connection that will tie right into the future light rail station. And we built a vision that would accommodate multiple modes. And so one of those barriers to biking is that a lot of people don't feel safe. Paint is not enough on the road to make them feel safe biking next to vehicles. And so it was about a 2-year process. We came up with a cross section that council adopted, and it moves those bikes off the road and up onto the sidewalk level, providing that added protection. It widens those sidewalks, and it puts in the amenity zones with trees, and kind of creating that walkable community. Now going south, I wanted to point out another connection. The 148th Street Bridge is a vision to tie together the community that's been divided by I-5 for the last 50 years. So this bridge would be for pedestrians and bicyclists, and it would bring peds and bicycles directly to the light rail station, and also connect with the interurban trail. I mean, not the interurban trail, sorry, the future trail along the rail. And it would also touch down this bridge, this 148th Street Bridge, to a vision that we have of extending 3rd Avenue to become a Woonnerf. So a Woonnerf is a Dutch term that means a shared street. And it's a place where pedestrian and bicycle movements are prioritized, and auto movements are, drivers go slow and expect to yield to pedestrians and bicyclists. So with this slow moving street, it really behaves more like a plaza, really very similar concept to Pike Place Market, where people walk all over, crisscrossing that street, and cars crawl through it. It would also provide that density of transportation choices that Jim mentioned, in that this could be a place for ride hailing, for e-bikes, for e-scooters, for just to park your bike while you take a ride on the light rail. Now, another piece of it is our city's commitment to becoming a bike-friendly community. We received a bronze designation by the League of American Cyclists. And it's really our commitment to strengthen our policies, our programs, and our projects to accommodate bicyclists. So I want to just show a couple of things that we've been up to. We outfitted the bike racks in front of City Hall to be more secure and accommodate bicyclists that come with either a cable lock or a U-lock. Our old ones, you had to have a cable lock to lock up. And then for our employees, we have a bike cage, and we did some renovation over the summer, and we added electricity. And we also, we did some space planning to add 4 more bike racks in that cage. And then, yes, we do have electric charging for anybody who comes to do business at City Hall. And so with that, I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. You're also welcome to reach me at my email address. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. That was great. I went to Echo Lake Elementary, so that's very exciting. I grew up very close to, I grew up on 190th, basically in Sunnyside. So it's nice to see that trail there on 195th and more walkable areas. So thank you. I'm very excited also to have the light rail coming so close to us to be able to use that. Did anybody have any questions? We have a question here about what about the curves on Perkins Way?
Perkins Way, yeah, as I mentioned, there's a lot of help that's needed for making those connections down to Lake Forest Park on Perkins Way. And I'm sure the person who's asking must be very familiar with them. It is a project in what we call our TIP, our Transportation Improvement portfolio. It's a very expensive project. That's, as you know, that's a narrow street with really, it steeply drops off. And I know there's only that, there's a Jersey barrier at some portions of it, but it's dicey. I will say, so it's on our radar. It's very expensive, and I think the solution really has to come from our City of Shoreline, working with Lake Forest Park for a cohesive solution.
And yes, so the person that asked that said she bikes it every day. The other question, I wasn't sure if you answered it earlier. The trail you were talking about, did it get approved? Now I don't remember which trail that was. Declan, this was your question. I don't know if it, let's see what they say here. Oh, the one by the light rail, that's what I was guessing.
Oh, great, yeah. Yeah, thanks for the follow-up question, because I really dashed through this, and I like talking about this vision that's going to become a reality. So then working with Sound Transit, many years leading up to this part, there was a lot of synergy with the light rail construction and the adjacent public right-of-way. And by the time a light rail opens, about 20 blocks of that trail will be constructed. Not continuous blocks, but 3 blocks here, 5 blocks another place. And that is really partly through the city's code. When Sound Transit was touching any dead-end street, our code requires pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. And So we were able to work collaboratively with Sound Transit to kind of fit it back together for the future. I will say, I'll just touch on one that's really going to feel, I think, like a trail, would be on Fifth Avenue between 185th and 180th. Sound Transit's going to build that portion of shared use path because they're realigning that portion of Fifth Avenue in order to fit the train. And because of that, our city asked them to put it back together that way.
That's fantastic. As an adult, I lived off of 1/5 on Serpentine, and I always was like, there should be sidewalks here. Anyway, more questions. Nora, do you do studies on bicycle safety of our roads?
You know, I haven't done any, that's not my specialty. Safety is very important to our city, and that's a big part of why we're moving with that 185th project I showed, is moving the bikes off the street to have more separation, especially our busy streets that have a lot of car volume and speed. I will put a plug in for, we're just about to lift off on our transportation master plan update. And we will be looking at all modes and really looking more systematically on how we can address safety for, you know, our most vulnerable users are the people walking and the people on bikes.
Yes, one of the attendees tonight said, thank you for improving bike friendliness. I'm getting an e-bike and traffic is my main concern. I agree by that one. Will there be more west-east bike paths, especially on the west side of Shoreline, from the water up to Aurora, etc.?
Right. Wow, that's a really steep hill there. Yeah. We do have a bike plan. It is getting old. It's going to be refreshed with the TMP updates. And I would really encourage everyone to get involved with that project. We will be advertising it in Currents, and we will have a dedicated web page for it. But if you're curious about what the vision is for the bike plan, in 2011, our city put together a vision, and a lot of it hasn't been implemented. So I think there's a lot of good ideas there, and we'll be building on them.
Fantastic. Will Shoreline be using permeable surfaces in their multimodal areas, modal areas?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we have, we actually have, let's see, that shared use path that I showed on 195th, that was built with porous concrete.
Great.
So we have demonstration projects throughout the city, and we hope to do more of that. It's a complicated choice. We have to be ready as a city to have the maintenance vacuums to do that. So it's something that we keep coming back to and discussing. And I'm glad you're asking about it.
Another question is, where is this last image taken? I'm going to guess Pioneer Square. Looks like maybe.
You know, I think it's Belltown. It's the Bell Street. Yep, it looks like the Bell Street corridor, which is, it feels like a Woonurf as well, especially on this day. They must have closed it down and had a street party.
Awesome. Let's see, after the bike path on Northwest Richmond Beach Road ends, heading east, there are no Sharrows. Can we get them, please? Sharrows?
Oh, yeah, I know. Yep. In the business, we'd call that a gap, that we need to take a look at that during our TMP update. Yep.
Great. And Nora, what ways are employed, such as e-bike speed limits when pedestrians share paths with cyclists and e-bike riders? Do you have any projects with Evergreen Mountain Bike Association to entice more kids to ride bikes?
Well, thanks for the tip about the Evergreen School. I like to do more school outreach to get students. I mean, that's the time where it's their freedom, it's their independence to have wheels. So I'll make a note of that. And then your first question was about actually sharing these paths with e-bikes or e-scooters, and that's something that's been on my mind quite a bit. So King County has a policy. At first step is just defining called micromobility devices, and to use those on shared use paths, they have to go less than 15 miles per hour. And I guess the other piece, not part of this question, but I think related, I'm gonna go there, is the parking for these shared micromobility scooters and bikes. I think it's our time to really plan out our streets and our hubs so that there's adequate room to park these and provide this accessibility that people need when they're walking. So I'll just couple that with, why not have charging stations there too, not just for the bike shares, but private owners have e-bikes and e-scooters that they need to charge up.
Absolutely. Does the plan for 175th include any accommodations for bicycles?
Yes, so I didn't show any slides on the 175th just from time, and also that project is very much live in design right now. But I imagine the person who asked the question has been involved, and please, thank you, and please stay engaged. And per a complete streets ordinance, we are looking at accommodating all modes. So right now, there's no bike lanes on 175th, but we know it's important to provide space for them. And there's also Meridian Park Elementary. A lot of kids walking to school and biking to school, and hopefully more if we made those facilities safe and separated.
Thank you. If bikes are, I don't know if that's me. If bikes are using elevated paths next to pedestrians, do they need to obey the traffic rules for pedestrians when crossing intersections?
It depends on how you treat the intersection and that space. So I didn't really get a close in of that detail on 185th, but we would be using different pavement types to help demarcate the space. So asphalt for the bike path and concrete for the sidewalk. And they'd be flush, so there wouldn't be a trip hazard. But getting to your question at the intersections, when we advance the design, you can either do it, I'm sure there's more than just two ways, but the two I can think of right now on the spot is, you could actually bring that bike path down to street grade and have the cyclists kind of move through the intersection like any other vehicle. Or you can, and you can see this in Seattle, you can create a very wide sidewalk. It's basically like a shared use trail across and cyclists cross, but it has to be wide. It can't be like 6 feet wide. It has to be bigger. Ideally, the same size as both of the facilities, the bike path and the sidewalk. So I guess I would just leave it at that. It's really important that it's obvious what to do, because that's key, and safety is like the safe and predictable movements. So I don't have I don't have a blanket answer for that, but that's something that we study when we advance the design.
Great. And the last question I have so far is, any plans to place bike lanes down the middle of roads instead of along the sides and having bike-only traffic lights?
You know, possibly. I guess I would need to think about the context of which street that would be, but yes, I mean, we're open to considering what would make sense.
Great.
Thanks.
Any other questions for any of the presenters? Hopefully I got all the questions. If I didn't, please feel free to share it in the chat again. And then I'm gonna just quickly reshare my PowerPoint here. Here we are at the question and answers. Let's see, hopefully these items are not, let me get that out of the way. Okay. Not seeing any more questions. I wanted to just share. Oh, now my PowerPoint's not going down. Hold on a second. Looks like I have another question. Is the design, so Nora, if you're still there, is the design you're thinking of like in Seattle, where the interurban is from 125th to 105th?
I'm not, sorry, I'm not placing that right now. When I was thinking of the Burke-Gilman Trail near the University District or University Place. There's some really wide crossings of that trail that both, well, bikes bike through it and people walk through it. I hope that helps.
All right. I guess maybe the last question, well, and maybe just really, if people have additional questions, I think it's wonderful that there's so much questions about biking. And so, you know, will there be opportunity for people to weigh in on the bike plan, or they just maybe email you with suggestions, Nora?
Sorry, I keep turning on and off my camera. Absolutely. I hope that all of you get engaged with the Transportation Master Plan. It's really the way we're going to shape the next 20 years of our transportation network. And I'm the project manager, so feel free to reach out to me at that email address. We are going to really be lifting off on our first wave of public engagement, probably after or starting up in January. So watch for that. There'll be a web page that you can go to and sign up for alerts. We will publish things in currents, and we will also, we're really going to try to do, even in the land of COVID-19, do what we can in terms of getting out to the community, even if they're remote meetings. We're envisioning kind of spreading out and having a lot of small group community meetings, as well as, you know, our large public open houses. But feel free to reach out to me with ideas and questions.
Wonderful, thank you. So everybody ready to take action? Here's some upcoming opportunities. I think that I pushed the wrong screen again, so let me hide that. So if you haven't already, there's still time to join the Shoreline Climate Challenge. If you're looking for more ideas on how you can save money and reduce your carbon footprint when it comes to home energy use and your transportation choices, check out the actions listed in the Shoreline Climate Challenge. Since June, there's been 300 households that have completed over 920 actions that has saved over $43,000 and reduced 145 tons of carbon emissions. So that's awesome. Shoreline, we've almost reached our goal, and there are still a few prizes left for households that complete at least one action before the end of the month. So learn more and sign up at shorelineclimatechallenge.org. So here's some information on here. Way to go. Okay, and then again, just wanted to mention there's a free screening of The Story of Plastic coming up. It's a free online viewing of the documentary, The Story of Plastic, which is taking place on Saturday, November 14th. It says, this 2020 film takes a sweeping look at the man-made crisis of plastic pollution and the worldwide effort it has had on the health of our planet and the people who inhabit it. The film will be followed by a conversation about how you can help create a waste-free world. So again, that's happening on Saturday, November 14th at 11 a.m. And registration link is available on the calendar events on the Shoreline webpage. And I believe that Autumn was going to put it in the chat if she's able to. And the final event that I wanted to mention is tomorrow night is another natural yard care class. So you can check out tomorrow night's natural yard care webinar and learn how to design attractive garden beds with plants that provide multiple benefits. Garden Hotline experts will give you tools to choose the right plant for the right place to create a garden that is beautiful, thrives with less effort, and supports pollinators and wildlife. Sounds good to me. So you can register for that at shorelinewa.gov/natural yard care. And I just wanted to mention too that we're going to be talking about permaculture at our next week's session, which leads me to this. Please be sure to check us out next week. As I mentioned, Food and Climate, a Recipe for Success, where we explore the food-climate connection and take action to reduce our food print in a sustainable kitchen. So thanks everyone again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Looks like we have some chat here, so thank you very much. And wonderful audience participation tonight. I just want to say thank you very much. So if you didn't see it, Autumn did post the registration link for The Story of Plastic, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful night.